You're listening to the Downeast Mike podcast, the quirky little podcast from Maine. And now, your host, Downeast Mike.
Good morning, everybody. This is Downeast Mike, your genial host of the Downeast Mike podcast. This is episode number 126, news and commentary for Friday, August 9th, 2024. We've been offline for a little bit, doing a little maintenance, and it looks like we got the cassette tape connected back together again with Scotch tape, and we had to rewind it with the pencil, but we got the cassette tape back in, and then we taped over the recording things there so we can record some more over the old Memorex, and here we are. Our motto from the Downeast Mike podcast is some of this is whimsy, some of it is true, and the interpretation of it all is entirely up to you. Leave nothing to chance when you listen to Downeast Mike. He's a little bit off. We have no mean words here, just wholesome goodness from Downeast Maine. In today's episode, we look at U.S. troops are taking up position in Saudi Arabia. That's a headline from 1990. Seems like a headline from today, doesn't it? We have the crime Roundup from 1990. Some fascinating stories that seem timeless of local crime that we like to go back and revisit. We have a hydrophobia bites, temperature spiking, and hen scratch stories from 1876 here in Maine. And then we're going to take a look at a Maine lighthouse that has a second job, as all lighthouses should, in lighthouse keeping. My father actually, was he interviewing? I forget what he was doing. He was somewhere and somebody said to him, well, what do you do? And he says, I'm a lighthouse keeper. And this person thought that he meant that he did lighthouse keeping. Did not get the fact that he was an actual lighthouse keeper with the Canadian Coast Guard. Okay, let's look at birthdays today. Happy birthday to Danny. Danny, Yukon Dan. He turns 63 years old tomorrow. And the older we get, those little age gaps between siblings seems to really narrow, doesn't it? Until some point, like, he'll be 103 and I'll be 100, and it won't be remarkable anymore that he seemed so much older when I was little, and he'd kick me as we went up the hill, and I'd hang onto his boot, and he'd kick me with his other good leg, and that was a tough struggle, but we got up the hill, didn't we? Happy birthday at any rate, and I hope those big old mitts of yours can still grip the mechanic's wrench and all the welding tools and whatnot that you wield up there in Dawson's Creek or wherever it is, on White Horse or someplace. I know the mosquitoes are big there. We're rambling this morning. Stay with us, folks. It's the Downeast Mike podcast. You never know what's going to happen. For example, we're going to talk about the illness of the instant right now, which is a swimmer's swirl. Swimmer's swirl is something that if you have an above ground round pool, you'll find yourself in a swimmer's swirl. Now, either because you're swimming in a circle and the green algae will whip up behind you like a small tornado and follow around as you swirl around your above-ground pool. That is swimmer's swirl, and the illness part of it is you get a little dizzy swimming in a small above-ground pool. You can swim back and forth, but eventually, despite your best intentions, you will probably end up swimming in circles, just like we do in life, going in circles. On this day, August 9th, but 1990, U.S. troops were taking up positions in Saudi Arabia by sea and by air. American paratroopers, seamen, and fighter pilots plunged into the gathering storm of the Middle East on Wednesday to defend the Saudi oil kingdom against any attack by a powerful expansionist Iraq. Hard to believe this was going on in 1990. All the fleets and squadrons of aircraft will not shake a single palm frond in Iraq, said a statement by Saddam's ruling council. And in Washington, President Bush warned the Iraqis that a line has been drawn in the sand in Saudi Arabia. I remember when he said that. And the first aircraft and ground forces of a U.S. expeditionary force took up positions on Wednesday. Let's see, the United States also turned to two of its longtime Middle East adversaries, Syria and Iran, seeking partners to counter Iraq's aggression. This will not stand. It's too bad. They still haven't figured it out over there. Let's go on to a little bit lighter story. This is from Machias, Maine, 1990. A 35-year-old Machias woman has been summoned by police on a complaint of reckless conduct with the use of a firearm after the woman allegedly fired a gun out of a Main Street apartment on August 2nd in an attempt to call her fiancé to supper. And this is where, some people might just use a dinner bell, but no, she fired her gun. Machias Police Chief Robbie Dursa said Wednesday that Foot Patrolman Donald Gerpart and Patrol Officer Danny Bunker, boy, that's a Downeast name, huh? They were on routine patrol downtown at about 7 p.m. when they heard a shot. They traced the shot to an apartment above the Asian Garden restaurant. The apartment is occupied by 35-year-old Denise Graham. Graham, who at first denied shooting a gun, later told police that she fired that gun, a .357 caliber Magnum, out a rear window of her apartment at the Machias River in an attempt to summon her fiancé to supper. The woman's fiancé was in a vehicle in the rear parking lot when the shot was fired, the chief added. The bullet was believed to have gone into the river behind the building. She's scheduled to answer to the complaint before Judge Douglas Clapp, September 5th, in 4th District Court in Machias. And that was like the local economy then. It's one way to keep things going. That one single gunshot employed three people from the police department, employs the judge, the clerk of the court, the bailiff, all those other people. It's just a wonderful part of the local economy. Nobody got hurt, and I'm assuming that fiancé did actually ultimately answer that call to dinner. Another story, had some other stories out of Machias. It wasn't just one little story. There's another. Police were investigating continuing their investigation into a shooting incident that occurred on Main Street during the weekend of July 14th, always a dangerous weekend. Workers at the Main Street Mobile discovered a bullet hole in a soft drink machine in front of the gas station, said Machias Police Chief Robbie Dursa. The Machias Police have had several unusual cases in recent days, beginning with a report of a stolen vehicle received on Friday, August 3rd. Apparently, there were two similar trucks parked at Helen's restaurant, said Dursa, and the keys were left in both of them. The trucks belonged to Greg Myers and Helen's restaurant owner Gary Hanscom. So Myers apparently got into the wrong truck at Helen's restaurant. He drove off without realizing it. The situation was eventually cleared up without charges being filed, Dursa said, but not before dispatchers at the Regional Communications Center complicated the matter by sending Dursa to the wrong restaurant. With that case settled, Dursa was called out at 2:30 p.m. to investigate a complaint called by a Dwight Whitney about a bad check for $30. It wound up being a pretty expensive check, said Dursa. He arrived at the scene, but was unable to shift the new cruiser into park. The shifter felt like it was stuck in jelly. The cruiser had to be towed away, and it's still undergoing repairs for a problem Chief Dursa said was caused by metal fatigue. Not mental fatigue, metal fatigue. The new cruiser has logged 20,000 miles since entering service. Warranty had expired, leaving the town responsible for repairs. Officer Danny Bunker was, there he is in the news again. He was dispatched on Friday to investigate a report of suspicious people behind the Machias Ford Mercury building on Main Street. Dursa said that at least 3 unidentified people were seen behind the business, but they disappeared before the investigating officer arrived. And then a prowler was reported by a homeowner near Machias Valley Airport 15 minutes later. I was prowlers. Dursa said that the owner claimed several unidentified people were in his yard, prompting him to call police. They left before police arrived. Boy, they're just losing everywhere. Then Bunker responded to a call at 12:28 a.m., August 4th. This is all up in Machias. Busy area. He was called there to investigate possible vandalism behind the Machias Memorial High School. Bunker found a trash can had been kicked over, and the suspects were not found. Overnight on Tuesday, combined units of Machias Police, Sheriff's Department, and State Police responded to a report of a brawl on Main Street in the area between Murphy's Pizza and Machias Apothecary. About 50 people were said to be involved in the incident, which began around 9 p.m. Tuesday. There were several instigators in the situation that grew way out of proportion, Dursa said. The police managed to break up the disturbance and sent everyone home. No arrests were made in the incident. What exciting times in 1990 in Machias. And you probably could roll that back to like the 1800s, and it would be a typical weekend and night out on the town there then. Automakers, this is a switching gears here story, no pun kind of intended. Automakers fear push for better fuel economy because they didn't want to have to reach these unattainable goals in fuel economy. And this is in 1990. The Middle East crisis is focusing attention on a bitterly contested effort that would require cars to have a fuel efficiency of 40 miles per gallon by 2001. Industry and consumer advocates are talking about this. We've been reminded that we squandered the breathing space of the 80s, not using that period of low prices constructively to lessen our dependence on foreign oil, Senator Richard Bryan said. Bryan, he's a Democrat out of Nevada. He introduced a bill that would mandate significant fuel economy improvement. The automakers opposed the bill, saying its goals are unrealistic and would require drastic reductions in automobile weight. All but the smallest cars would disappear from showrooms, they say, and many consumers would keep their old gas guzzlers rather than crowd the family into a subcompact. It's an attempt to legislate the family car out of existence, General Motors spokesman said this week. Under current law, new car fleets, all the cars that a company produces in a model year, are required to average at least 27.5 miles per gallon. Now, what's your car get today? And this is 1990, and they were required to get 27.5. They were looking to improve by 20% by 1995 model year and 40% by 2001. And we look today, we went to the energy.gov site, and they have a little history here. In 1975, the sedan wagon class had the highest average fuel economy of all new light-duty vehicles produced at 13.5 miles per gallon. Boy, that's not very good, is it? Those big old Ford LTD wagons. By 2021, the average fuel economy for the sedan wagon class had risen to 31 miles per gallon. From 1975 to the 1980s, all vehicle classes experienced a sharp increase in fuel economy. This was followed by a period where the average fuel economy among vehicle classes remained flat. Beginning around 2000, fuel economies began to rise again. While all vehicle classes have experienced impressive gains in fuel economy over the past 2 decades, the car SUV class has seen a 70% improvement since 2000. The sharp increase in the van-minivan class in the last few years is likely due to the introduction of hybrid and plug-in hybrid models. Nonetheless, I don't think that the actual miles per gallon has really improved all that much since the 1990s. Let's roll the clock all the way back to August 9, 1876. In the headline news, Serbia has asked the European powers to mediate to secure peace. They were fighting in Europe. The weather was cool and comfortable yesterday, same this morning, and slightly lower temperatures and generally clear weather. It's kind of a vague forecast. We'll get into those temperatures in just a second. We had a case of hydrophobia the other day. A gentleman from Portland, whose name we did not learn, came to Augusta, accompanied by a friend, and was stopping at the house of Mrs. Temple on Granite Street. I know where that is. One evening after supper, he was sitting with his friend in the front yard, engaged in smoking. That's back when smoking was an actual engagement. He remarked that a fit was coming on, as he felt the unmistakable symptoms. He was soon rolling upon the ground, frothing at his mouth, and to all appearances in mortal agony. He made a noise somewhat similar to the barking of a dog. He would also try to bite. You'd probably give him some space. 5 persons attempted to hold him, but were unable to do so during his most severe convulsions. The poor fellow remained in this condition some 24 hours, and did not appear to be greatly exhausted when he came to himself. He remarked that the reaction always came 2 or 3 days afterwards. He relates that several years ago, 12 years ago to be exact, he was bitten by a dog, and since that time every year, and only once a year, he is afflicted by these manifestations that greatly resemble hydrophobia. He always had sufficient warning of their coming. The attacks occur every year. Last year he was attacked in June, and when he's conscious of an approaching attack, he takes the precaution to lie down, or otherwise he has a desire to pursue and bite whoever may come in the way. That was from the Augusta Journal, 1876. A story out of New Portland. The farm and outbuildings of Emery and Edsel Churchill were destroyed by fire Sunday morning, together with 25 tons of hay, all the farming tools, and most of the household goods. Loss estimated at $1,000, no insurance. A purse of $200 was made up to them by the citizens of New Portland and vicinity. And they're talking about the temperature there in that time was 100 degrees in the shade, 2 p.m. on Monday. And then if we look at Anson on Sunday afternoon, the temperature was 102 degrees in the shade. That's gotta feel hot. Out of Penobscot, the Supreme Judicial Court commenced in Bangor on Tuesday. The Whig newspaper says that a young man from Orono was sunstruck on Monday afternoon on the grounds at Barnum's Circus in Bangor. I wonder if they had the elephant there. A boy was also sunstruck. The temperature stood at 104 degrees in the shade at noon there, and that was in Bangor. An Auburn lawyer was out sailing at Yarmouth a few days before, and as the boat went boiling along, he enthusiastically exclaimed, "This is worth $1 a minute." About $15 worth later, the same legal gentleman was bending over the rail, faint and limp, holding his breath on the waters, and declaring that he'd be blank spot there if he would ever go out sailing again. For 15 minutes, what it took him to get seasick. Here's a story, the usefulness of hens as insect destroyers. It's from the Vermont Chronicle, where they don't censor you. A half-dozen hens kept the potato bugs from the editor's garden while neighboring gardens were ravaged. He took a bunch of hens. They ate the eggs and slugs, giving the bugs no chance for their lives. It's estimated that 1 dozen hens will protect an acre of potatoes. The Chronicle also says that the hens are a sure protection against currant worms, squash and cucumber bugs, and even against borers in apple and plum trees when they have the run of the grounds. This is claiming more for the hens than we were aware was due them, but if they are thus useful, it is highly important to have it generally known. What has been the experience of the readers of the journal in regard to the ravages of the currant worm, where the hens had free access to the bushes? Have apple trees, where hens frequented their shade, been exempt from borers? Has it been the experience of our readers that cucumber and squash vines have been protected by hens from bugs otherwise than by scratching at the vines? I like the questioning period. They were trying to get engagement back then. It hasn't changed much. If we go over to the X world, that wraps up the old-timey news. And now we're going to take a look at Maine's lighthouse that had a second job. It's quite the story. The Pemaquid Point lighthouse. I wanted to say Penobscot. Pemaquid Point Lighthouse. And that's right at the entrance to Muscongas Bay. It was established in 1827, first lit in 1835 for the current tower. The United States government established the original Pemaquid Point Lighthouse about a third of a mile from Pemaquid Point at the entrance to Muscongas Bay. And then President John Quincy Adams ordered the original structure built in 1827, but later in 1857, President James Buchanan ordered the light rebuilt. I don't think he really did. The current structure is a white tower. It's 34 feet high, and it exhibits its light at 79 feet above sea level. It seems higher than that when you're there. The only man to ever win some trivia here, the only man to ever win the Medal of Honor and the Gold Life-Saving Medal, Marcus Hanna, once served as keeper of the light. The station did become automated in 1934. Its lens is a Fresnel lens that was put in 1856, probably the same lens that's there now. The U.S. Lighthouse Service constructed a fog bell house and tower in 1897, but by 1930 that bell was removed. That little bell house there took a big hit in a storm last winter. The lighthouse has the distinction of being the first Sentinel Maine to be automated when its keeper was permanently removed. And that was in I don't have the date on that, but we'll get there. Here's its second job that it had. The Pemaquid Point has a defensive role, and this is a story out of 1960. A man's love for Pemaquid Point with its unchallenged beauty, man-made and natural, provided an enjoyable day last summer when we accompanied the Lewiston Evening Journal's sports editor Norm Thomas on a personal tour of that famed portion of the Rocky Coast. Norm, an adopted Pemaquid son, shared with us a wealth of picturesque beauty and provided an abundance of historical fact, only a portion of which we digest at one telling, sort of like one of these podcasts. Today, however, we have occasion to supply Norm with the latest page of Pemaquid's eventful history, the story of its 20th century contribution to world peace. And they had to put a good spin on it here. On that memorable trip, we approached the famed point, and there were met by a figure as interesting as his surroundings. The old gent, whose very face reflected a lifetime battle with winds and tide, had retired his lobster boat and settled for a deputy sheriff's badge, doubling as gate tender on the point. He should have gone up to Machias to work if he wanted to be busy. In the company of his attractive German shepherd companion, the old lobsterman collects a 10-cent fee and provides the visitor with assorted bits of historical fact connected with the romantic surroundings. He gestured toward the old lightkeeper's house, whose aged frame, docked in a new whitewashed cover, stood proudly at the water's edge. They get kind of flowery speech here, defiant of a sometimes angry sea, dominating its vantage point in a victorious gaze over the ocean. It's a lighthouse. The story ends abruptly, however, with a comment that it now is occupied by the U.S. Navy for some sort of experimentation. We learn the full impact of this age-worn house and its secretive activities therein, that they'll have an effect on Pemaquid's history, and for that matter, on the nation's military history. They have a picture here. Some dudes in the 1960s hanging out on a boat looking at the buoys that we're going to get into here. Cape Canaveral of the Sea is Pemaquid's 20th century nickname, and its fame is spreading internationally as military strategists of all allied nations keep a hopeful eye on this little Maine community and its contribution to world peace. You're going to see what an exaggeration this article is in a minute. While Canaveral is the proving grounds for space conquest mechanisms, Pemaquid is the proving ground for experimentation on the world's other frontier, the ocean's subsurface. And in the picture headline, it says, trained technicians aboard this crash boat stand by as the sono buoys are tested while submerged, and after the test, they recover the buoys and return them to the Waldoboro plant for further testing. Note the antenna-like hydrophones attached to each buoy. Kind of a grainy black and white picture there. Here, this is at Pemmiquid, the sonobuoy, an electronic underwater sound detection device, is put through its paces to determine its workability in the modern battle to gain control over the red submarine threat. The sonobuoy is basically a cylindrical can about 5 feet in length. It's dropped from an aircraft over a supposedly unwary submarine. Upon contact with the water, the buoy releases a microphone on a cord. The microphone then picks up the various sounds made by the sub and transmits them back to the circling aircraft, disclosing information that may lead to the eventual destruction of the enemy sub. And here at Pemmiquid, the Vocal Line Company of America, LAMCC Division, Waldoboro, has combined efforts with the Naval Air Station at Brunswick for the testing and research investigation of the sonobuoy. Considerable secrecy still overshadows the project. We recall a few years back when we had occasion to fly in one of Brunswick's Neptune planes on a training flight, how elaborate security measures were taken to protect the radar and sonar equipment aboard from the public eye. Portions of photos which were taken to accompany the story were screened by military and doctored to conceal vital portions from the public eye before publication. Secrecy still overshadows the Lightkeeper's house and its activities, but some facts are known. For instance, the sonobuoy's effectiveness is such that the very footsteps of persons aboard a passing boat can be clearly picked up by the mechanism. Isn't that something? I wonder how close the boat had to be that they could hear footsteps. A contract for the testing and development of the sonobuoy has been granted to the Vocal Line Company of America by the Bureau of Naval Weapons, according to the Brunswick Naval Air Station's Public Relations Department. The sonobuoy is manufactured by several large companies under defense contracts. Today, with the threat of nuclear submarines ever increasing, the perfection of the sonobuoy is increasingly important. In the past, there were many technical failures during operational usage. This is where the Vocal Line Company plans its role. Now, before the Navy will accept a shipment of sonobuoys, a representative number from the lot are taken to Pemmiquid Point to be thoroughly tested for efficiency. And at this point, the Naval Air Station Brunswick enters the picture. Working with Vocal Line, a Neptune patrol bomber, one of the Navy's primary anti-submarine warfare aircraft, will drop the buoy, and then they test it there to see if it works. And that's the second job for the Pemmiquid Point Lighthouse. It's kind of a long way of getting to that story, but I'm glad we did. I'm actually, that's the end of the podcast for today. I thank you for listening. I'm glad you're still with me. I hope you're still with me. Until next time, this is Downeast Mike, wishing you and your loved ones a day that is full of grace, love, and kindness. We'll see you.
Father was a lighthouse keeper in the Tuscan Islands. He sought to live a simple life in a modern age. Day and night he tended the light in all kinds of weather. Months had passed before he'd get a chance to go ashore. And he'd sing, I'll keep a light for you. Oh, the storms I'll guide you through. I'll keep a light for you. I will tend to the flame. The years went by on candlebox till that fateful day. Some bureaucrats from Ottawa saw the coming rage. We can save some dollars here, we'll send this guy ashore. With the new technology, we won't need him anymore. And he's singing, I'll keep the light for you. Oh, these storms I'll guide you through. I'll keep a light for you. I will tend to this flame. Now he spends his days ashore, sitting by the fire. He wonders about the days gone by, knows the old desire. And in his mind the clipper ships still are running free, running rum and whiskey up the old Bay of Fundy. I'll keep